Hi, welcome to today's video, where today we're going to go through everything I've read in September. Now to start with, we're going to go through what I bought. Now I've been trying to scale it back, not spend too much money, but I did buy a couple things. I couldn't help myself. I bought the Deadpool vs Wolverine Marvel Select, and then I also bought the Weapon X Marvel Select. Both Deadpool and Wolverine themed. It wasn't intentional. I just saw them and I was like, I can't help it, I've got to get them. They were £10 each, I think, and they had like a collection of stories with both of them in it. Of course, I also picked up the new Spider-Man magazine and Miles Morales and the Deadpool and Wolverine magazine, all by Panini, because they're easy to get to in my local WH Smith's. And then the only 3 actual new comics I picked up was Uncanny X-Men #1, but it's the second printing, and The Spectacular Spider-Man issue 6, and then lastly I picked up Ultimate Spider-Man #7. So not too many things this month. Now physically, I didn't read that many things. I'm looking at my list. It's not that long. I did read the Deadpool vs Wolverine Marvel Select, because that was just, I think it was 5 or 6 issues of just Deadpool and Wolverine just fighting. It was pretty entertaining. It was iconic issues. They don't come to mind right now, but they were pretty good. I also read some back issues of my Spider-Man magazines I've been picking up. I read issue 43, which had issue 73 and 74 from the Amazing Spider-Man run. And then I read issue 44 of the Spider-Man mag, which had the end of the Sinister War and the rest of issue 74. I also read the Miles Morales issue 13, which had issue 10 of his run, and Spider-Gwen Shadow Clone, the last half of that, issue 1 from that series. Like a nice little bit of both in one magazine. And then I read issue 14, which had Miles Morales issue 11 and Spider-Gwen Shadow Clone issue 2. Then I read Deadpool and Wolverine, the magazine, issue 20, which had the last few pages of World War III, and then the first half of issue 2, as well as Wolverine issue 40. And then I read the Spectacular Spider-Man issue 5, because I got issue 6, so I thought I might as well read the one I've been saving. And then the last physical issue I read this month was, of course, my Uncanny X-Men issue 1. I couldn't help myself, I couldn't save it, I couldn't leave it on my little stack of to-be-read pile. It was really good, I thoroughly enjoyed it. I do like the X-Men more, I'm getting more into X-Men, and I feel like I read a fair bit of Deadpool and Wolverine this month. Now onto what I read digitally. I started by reading a couple Thor issues. I read issue 134 to 137. I don't really remember what happened in these, I'm not gonna lie. I think it was just nothing too significant, but Jane Foster did become an immortal for about 10 seconds of one issue, I think. And then I also read Thor, the second annual. Don't remember what happened in that one, but I don't remember hating it. So I think it wasn't too bad. Like I've said, Thor's pretty hit or miss for me. I've got to be in a certain mood to enjoy Thor comics. So that's why I didn't read any more last month. For some reason, all I read this month was one issue of Tales of Suspense, which is the Iron Man and Captain America split issue. But I only read issue 87, which I think Iron Man went against Mole Man, which was pretty cool. From what I remember, if it's the issue I'm thinking of, it was a really cool issue, and I don't know why I didn't read more of it last month. Then I read issue 71 and 72 of the Fantastic Four, which I love the Fantastic Four. I really like their comics. I think they're really interesting and fun. I like the dynamic they all have going on, so I'm probably going to read a lot more this month. Of course, I also read some X-Men, where I read issue 28, 29 and 30, which they were quite enjoyable. It had a few issues with the Mimic, So he had all of their powers combined, slash whoever he was kind of standing near. You also had the Banshee in one of the issues, which was pretty cool idea. And the super, I've got it written down, the Super Adaptoid, which has loads of powers. I think of the Avengers. As well as the Warlock, which I'm pretty sure I've read an issue about him before. I'm not too sure, but I think I've seen him before. They get a bit confusing. I get a bit confused on some of the names sometimes, because they're all kind of similar. But he was quite magical. Magical? Yeah, I think magical's the word. But I love the X-Men too. It was great. I definitely want to read some more this month. I also went through a phase of reading the giant-sized versions of characters. So I read giant-sized Daredevil, which is a split issue. So the first half is an issue about Kingpin in the streets, and then it has a reprint of Daredevil 170. So it's a very Fisk-focused giant issue, which I enjoyed. I like a bit of Daredevil. Then I read Giant Size Fantastic Four, which had the first, these are also like split issues, so they're like half of something new and a reprint. So the first half was the first king who tried to unite people of, I've forgotten what they're called, but the ones that are under the water, like Namor's ones. I can't remember what the species is called. It's going to come to me after I finish recording this. And then it has issue 33 of Classic Fantastic Four reprinted, which I've already read, but it was great to see. Then I read Giant Size Spider-Man. It was Miles Morales, and he finds Rabble's tech, and it leads into Gang War. It's like a little prelude to Gang War, which I have read in full, and I thought it was a good issue and a nice leading on point to it. And then it was a reprint of Ultimate Spider-Man 22, which was a Venom-focused issue, which I also enjoyed. Then I read Giant Size Spider-Gwen, which had MJ as Carnage, and then a reprint of Spider-Gwen, issue 13. All these Giant Size issues were great. I think they should make more of them, of every character. I loved it. I think they were good to read. Then I read Shadow of the Green Goblin, issue 1 to 3, which I quite enjoyed. I'm definitely going to keep reading these issues. I'm going to make sure I read them as they get released onto the Marvel app, because I enjoyed it. I had a good time reading it. And then I read Spider-Boy issue 1 to 8. I didn't know anything about Spider-Boy before I read this. I didn't know what his powers were, what his origin was. I didn't know anything about him, or what he really existed. Didn't even know who he was. But then I saw him and I was like, you know what? I'll give that a read. And I enjoyed it. I thought he had a really nice story. Like, it was quite fun, quite well written. So I'm definitely going to be keeping up with Spider-Boy. Every time I see one uploaded on the app, I'll be reading that. And then the last issue I read digitally was Avengers 34. A bit of a random one, because it is the first half of a two-parter. But I love the Avengers comics. I can't say a bad thing against it. Now time to get on to the amount of Infinity comics I read. So I read Marvel Fairy Tale issue 1 to 4. I think that was the whole series. And it was just like Jack and the Beanstalk mixed with Spider-Man. It was great. I enjoyed it. It was a little fun read. Then I read the whole series of Savage Wolverine. So that's issues 1 to 8. It was quite brutal, quite good Wolverine. I had fun reading it. It was like its own story in itself, self-contained. It was great. Now, I said I'd keep up with this one, and I still don't know how I feel about it. I'm not too much of a big fan of it, but I think I'm going to read it anyway. It's House of Harkness. I read issues 2 to 5. It still feels like a weird Wattpad fan fiction, like different universe kind of thing where they're all in school. It could just be a random comic of completely separate characters and I wouldn't even know. I don't know. I'm probably still going to read it, but it's weird. And then I read The Lovable Lockheed, issue 1 to 4. I have no idea what he was, but he looks like a dragon, and he looks cool, and he lives with the X-Men. So what's not to like? Then I read X-Men issue 14 to 17, which is quite good. I don't mind the X-Men Unlimited series. I read it because it's there, not because I'm too into it. But I'm probably going to keep reading it. Like, let's be honest, I'm going to keep reading it as it gets released weekly. Then I read Deadpool vs. Wolverine Slash 'em Up, issue 1 to 6. So that's that was the full series. It was about Deadpool and Wolverine slashing each other up over something. Over a contract Deadpool had and a debt that Wolverine had to pay off. And then the last Marvel comic I read was Doodle Pool, issue 1, and it was just like a load of drawings that Deadpool has done to tell like little stories. I don't know, it was just a fun one. And then the last thing that I read this month, which was a pretty hefty amount of my time, was spent on this. But I read One Piece, chapter 1 to 176, which does the whole of the East Blue arc, all the way up to Alabasta, and a little bit into that. I just couldn't stop reading it. I have some of the volumes on my shelf, and I think that takes us to just after volume 19. I'm not going to even think about how much of my month was dedicated to One Piece. But I read some of them digitally, some of them physically. I love One Piece. I will definitely keep reading that. I want to get to a point where I can read it as it comes out. And that's everything I've read this month. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.